Welcome to the Valley Politics History Interviews. I'm Terry Christensen. Becky Morgan was elected to the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors in 1980 and to the California State Senate in 1984. She was part of a female majority during her time on the board, and although this is hard to comprehend now, she made history in the state Senate when she wore pants in the legislative chambers. She was the last Republican elected to the state Senate from the South Bay, but she reveals in this interview that by 2019, she was no longer a Republican. We aired our interview with Becky Morgan in two parts in 2019. Now, here it is in full. Becky Morgan, welcome to Valley Politics.
Thank you very much, Terry.
So 4 years as county supervisor and then state senator. What got you into politics in the first place? What inspired you to run? I know you were on a school board first.
Well, there's a little bit of Irish in me, and I liked being in the community and talking. I saw my father get great satisfaction out being a school board member and what they called select men back in Vermont.
Yeah.
And I like to solve problems, and I like to be of service.
And why county in particular to start with?
Well, I really started with the Palo Alto School Board,
yes.
And then I got recruited to the county when Jerry Steinberg was retiring. And the county appealed to me because it was local, but the issues to be dealt with were things that I felt I had some background in: children, transportation, and just the ability to work with just three other people, but in an important county, a very important county.
Yeah, county board's only 5 people, and when you joined the board, 3 of them were women. And
yes.
You were on the board in the early 80s when San Jose and Santa Clara Valley were named by themselves, by ourselves, I think, as the feminist capital of the United States. A majority of women on the city council. I think Leona Eglund was in the state assembly, 3 women on the board. Did that make a difference for how decisions were made, that you were majority women?
Well, I think we sometimes focused on different things. I think it was important that we were able to hire a woman as county executive, Sally Reed.
Sally Reed, yeah.
While there were differences in how we approached things, we were able to divide up the things we cared about. Sally met with us regularly, so there were no surprises to her or to us for the most part. And there was never harshness that I see so much of today in politics. That we did work pretty well together, and the 2 men, Rod Dearden and Dan McCorkerdale, that were there were never unkind. They might disagree with me, they might argue with me, they might tease me about my vote, but they were not unkind. And I see so much unkindness today.
Yeah, you were the only Republican on the board too.
That was true.
But was that ever a problem?
It only showed up around union issues and around some of the budget decisions, which where some of my philosophy and values and my business background and desire to make sure the budget stayed balanced came in. I mean, we had some people that wanted to sell the plants and put in a plug figure to try to balance the budget. I didn't quite approve of those kinds of activities. But it was pretty congenial, considering the split in gender and politics.
What were the most controversial issues during your time on the board?
A small one, actually, I remember, was whether or not to sell the county golf course. And I think there were some things happening under the table that I never was quite aware of. But that became quite feisty, actually. So that was one that surprised me.
Was it sold?
And it was sold, and it was. Of course, it was always an issue. Valley Medical Center seemed to always come in over budget by about $2 million.
Yeah.
And that was when we had a $60 million budget, not a $1 billion budget.
Wow, that's a big difference. And you were dealing with post-Prop 13. Prop 13 passed in '78. You're on the board. You get elected in 1980. Yes. So there were budget challenges every year, I expect.
Yes, in 1982, I believe, was the one that was the worst, where we were having to make significant cuts. And I remember saying to Sally Reed at the time, I never knew I was going to have to play God here. I took the job to be of service, or ran for the job to be of service, but we were having to decide between foster children and abused women, and just some really tough decisions.
Yeah, so much of county is social services and healthcare services for people who need those services.
That's
that
right.
makes the cuts
Yep.
really painful.
Yep.
Well, what was your greatest accomplishment on the board? What are you most proud of?
In Santa Clara County Board, there's some tangibles.
Yeah.
Route 85 had been a dotted line on a county map for over 20 years. And
People probably can't even imagine the county without
85.
it now.
No, but I
it
was
wasn't
the
there.
one that pulled together representatives from each of the cities along the intended route.
Mm-hmm.
And it was painful, but fortunately, only about 15 houses had to be condemned and moved to make the road happen. And I can't even imagine today what the residential streets would be like without Route 85 on the way to Carmel and Pebble Beach and all. Yeah. So that was good. And then the new jail needed to be built, and I chaired that effort and visited other counties and negotiated with Mayor Janet Gray Hayes about the fact that it needed to be in San Jose and where it would be, and which is the current location. And of course, it was the children's shelter that I helped initiate and was completed under the leadership of Supervisor Diane McKenna and her husband Regis.
Those are some pretty big accomplishments for 4 years.
Well, I love projects.
Yeah. So the next project was getting elected to the state senate, and you did get elected in 1984.
Yes.
Served till 93, re-elected twice.
Yes.
When you went to the state senate, women were not a majority.
That's for sure.
There were 4 out of 40.
Oh, yes.
And I know you made news for wearing pants in the
You
chambers.
You researched that one.
I did.
Yes. And that pantsuit is in the archive somewhere up in Sacramento.
The pantsuit is in the archives.
It was totally unintended.
Oh,
And
really?
it was a cold January morning, and I had this new wool pantsuit, and I was fascinated that the person that came to me to question it, because I was the first woman to wear pants on the Senate floor, and it was a female reporter who came to question me. It was happenstance, and I have many, many women have come up to me since and said, thank you, we can now wear slacks, we are out of the pantyhose, and it's so much more comfortable, and we appreciate it.
Well, you made history.
Other ways are more important, but that has been significant for many women.
Other than breaking those rules, what were your main things you focused on as a
I thought
senator?
when I went to the Senate that I'd really focus on education, and I was on the Education Committee and got through legislation to reduce class size from 25 to 30 down to under 20, but there wasn't enough money to do it everywhere. But what I ended up spending more effort on was saving Caltrain from San Jose to San Francisco. Governor Dugmasian didn't want to be in the transit business and was going to close.
So the state was operating?
The state was in contract with Southern Pacific.
To operate a commuter service along the Caltrain, what we call Caltrain.
Caltrain area. And I knew as soon as the train stopped running, that space would become commercial and residential, and we'd never have a train. At that time, about 17,000 people were riding to the train. Now over 70,000 people ride it every day, and I'm pleased that we were able to save it.
Well, this would be a very different valley without Highway 85 and Caltrain. How did you save it?
I introduced legislation to set up a joint powers agreement between the 3 counties, Santa Clara, San Mateo, and San Francisco, to run the train, and then negotiated with Southern Pacific to sell it to their contract to the state and to help us make the transition. And so the joint powers agreement was set up, and I was 1 vote short to get my legislation passed, and I went to Speaker Willie Brown, and he said, you'll have your votes. And that
But he's Speaker of the Assembly.
Yes, but
And you're in the Senate.
But legislation has to go to both houses and then to the governor to be
You're
passed.
1 vote short in both houses?
I was 1 short vote in the Assembly.
In the Assembly, I see. And of course, he's from San Francisco.
That helped.
Where the train goes.
But also the point I want to make is those were the days when people helped each other.
So yeah, people should remember he was a very liberal Democrat.
Absolutely.
You were a moderate Republican in the state Senate.
But he saw the purpose, and he respected the fact that I was carrying it, and got me the last vote I needed to make the Joint Powers Agreement happen.
And Governor Deukmejian, a Republican, didn't want us.
And got me the last vote I needed to make the Joint Powers Agreement happen.
And Governor Deukmejian, a Republican, didn't want to save the rail line in the first place, but he signed the legislation?
He did after 2 years. It took me 2 years, but it happened. And I'd like to make a point about the collaboration that we had in those days.
Yeah.
Obviously, Willie didn't vote on all my bills,
Yeah.
or other Democrats, because at that time I was a Republican, which I am not any longer. But two things I tell young women are, get a sport and reach out. Because I skied in the competition with the Nevada legislature and got to know Tom Hayden from California.
Tom Hayden, a very, very liberal.
A very, very liberal.
Democrat.
And then I played tennis with Gary Hart, a moderate Democrat.
Yeah.
And when I needed a vote for something that was really important to me, they would talk with me. And if it wasn't offensive to them or against their political beliefs, they'd make sure I had the votes.
And there were both other state senators at that time.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, Tom Hayden at that time was in the Assembly.
He was in the Assembly.
Gary Hart was in the Senate, and he
Yeah.
was chair of the Education Committee that I was vice chair for.
So your advice is get a sport.
It helped me.
You got to have some way to get to know people
Absolutely.
beyond the chambers, right?
Yep.
And I suppose for women, you don't go to Fat
No,
Frank's
the men
or
would
whatever
go
the bar
out and have a
bars-
drink after
yeah.
work or whatever. That's not comfortable for me,
Yeah.
to go to a bar with another man. I was a married woman and doing my job, but I was invited occasionally to go to Frank Fat's, which was the watering hole,
Yeah.
and with Ken Maddie, head of the Republicans in the Senate,
Yeah.
and with Speaker Brown.
You got reelected twice, but then you resigned in what would have been your third term, right?
Right.
To become CEO of joint venture Silicon Valley. Why did that interest you? Why was that more interesting than serving out your Senate term?
In 1993, I had asked Governor Wilson to appoint me as state superintendent of schools when Bill Honig was removed from office because of some fraud. It wasn't going to happen. In the middle of that time, I got a call from the recruiter for joint venture Silicon Valley, which was a new startup idea here in the Valley. And I said, let's talk. And when they shared what they were trying to do to bring government, business, and the Civic Center together and to focus some of the issues that they needed, like streamlining the regulatory process, helping the schools do a better job, and including their business offices. Those projects, if you will, those challenges interested me. And so when they offered me the job, because I would have also been termed out.
Oh, right. It would have been your last term.
It was my last term.
Yeah.
And so I took the opportunity to come back home and help out in Silicon Valley.
And what do you think you achieved in that role at joint venture?
I don't know how much carryover there's been, but at the time, I think we may have had some impact. For instance, the cities came together to streamline their regulatory process and to unify their building codes so that companies could build more quickly, provide jobs sooner. And then we also put about $25 million into our schools during that 5 years. Business people would come in and help them improve their business offices. We brought in curriculums that were successful in other places that they integrated into the work of their schools. We got people working together kindergarten through 12th grade because, you know, in Silicon Valley, it's pretty broken up. There are only 2 unified school districts, K-12. So we got them what we called the vertical slice, getting superintendents and principals working together, K-12.
Well, that's a fair amount to accomplish. So you were actually one of the last Republicans to get elected in Santa Clara County. We had the actual last one, Jim Canine, got elected to the Assembly after your
Yes,
term.
and he worked on my
in
staff
office.
for 2 years.
Oh, that's right. But Republicans are a small minority in this county now. The party's changed. Jim's left the party.
So have I.
You've left the party. I was going to ask you what your views are on the party today and where you are.
Well, I went declined to state in early 2000s because I didn't say I left the party left me. And the moderation, I mean, I grew up in the Pete McCloskey era.
Yeah.
He was a mentor of mine. And I grew up in Vermont where we never knew a Democrat until I was in my late 20s.
Yeah.
And, but the focus on moderation and on only what people can't do for themselves of the Lincoln era and the highway system of the Eisenhower era, those were Republicans that did important things in my mind, and it was not happening. And so I declined to state, and now because of the open primary, I can vote.
You can vote
either way.
That's right.
And I do.
Jim Canine says he's ready to work on a new third party, a new party anyway. Would you be interested in something like that?
I see the value in it. In fact, a moderate Democrat that you have dual seats in the Senate, and a moderate Democrat and I often voted similarly, and we said we need to start a new party.
Yeah.
It's a long timeline, and as someone aged 80, I think I'll let the younger generation do this.
Well, meanwhile, I know you're busy with the Morgan Family Foundation. I want to hear about the work you do there, and especially about the Northern Sierra Partnership, which I think has had some really exciting news recently. Tell us about those projects.
We have been blessed to have the resources to have a family foundation, and we give to many organizations that already exist. About 150 or 60 get grants a year. And I should hasten to say we don't take unsolicited requests.
Well, I was just filling out my application.
But three nonprofits that our family started in the last 20 years included the Northern Sierra Partnership, where there's just such precious property up there. And the pressure from Reno to move into the Northern Sierra, the pressure of Silicon Valley to move up to the area was just going to be wiping out all the natural resources. And so we put 5 nonprofits together, including land trusts. And it's a 5 million acre region, of which we're just trying to save about 100,000 acres of property, rivers, lakes. So animals flow through more easily and people continue to have recreation.
Just 100,000 acres.
Well, we're up to 80,000 now.
Well, that's a lot. That's a lot,
Yes.
but it's a big project.
Yes, it is. So I've been very happy about, helped get it started. My husband is the chair of the partnership. But also one of my important projects is teen success, where I guess being in the social service arena, I'm aware of some of the needs, and we work with teen mothers and their children, support them weekly, get them through high school, and a few of them are going on to college. This is throughout California, but San Jose is a center. There are over 700 children born to teen moms every year in San Jose, and we're trying to break through and have remove 2 generations from poverty by helping the mothers succeed, helping the children learn to read, and just having better life.
Well, that's a lot of great accomplishments and a lot of good current projects as well. So congratulations, and thanks for being with us today. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
For other interviews with the leaders and activists who shaped the history of San Jose and Santa Clara County, look for the Valley Politics History Interviews on YouTube.